Hello, Guilty Feminist. This is Deborah. We are going to be at the Soho Theatre on the 7th of July and the 14th of July, and there we are doing Edinburgh preview shows. If you can't get to the Edinburgh Fringe this year, this is an evening of microwave Edinburgh Fringe. You get to see lots of different acts on the same night, previewing small parts of their shows. If you are going to go up to the Fringe, this is a great place to try before you buy. On the 7th of July, we have Sarah Barron, Reb Day, Freya Parker and Anna Leong Brophy. And on the 14th of July, we have Alice Fraser, Katie Pritchard, Rosie Holt and Jess Robinson. Both of those nights will be incredible. They will be entirely different, so you can come to both if you can get to them. We are at Ventnor Fringe and the Isle of Wight with Felicity Ward and a very special guest on the 18th of July. And we're at the Edinburgh Festival on the 20th, 21st, 22nd and 23rd of August. For tickets to all of these, go to guiltyfeminist.com and click on live shows. My book, 6 Conversations We're Scared to Have, is out now in paperback. Gillian Anderson said it was an essential guide to nuanced conversations in a polarised world. Who are we to argue with Gillian Anderson? You can afford it now. It's out in paperback. Go and get it wherever you get your books, online or in person, ideally from someone who pays their tax. And as always, don't forget to rate, review and subscribe. If you could right now find the follow button, find the subscribe button and click it. And if you enjoy this episode, forward it to somebody you think would like it, or another episode, WhatsApp it to them, post it on socials. If you review it and you talk about us, then it really helps other people find the podcast, which really helps us keep making more and doing more community action days. And now, on with the podcast. Last week, I saw a brilliant show at the Almeida Theatre. It's called Under the Shadow, and it's a really intriguing play. I had no idea what to expect. I knew it was about Iranian women in wartime, but I had no idea, and I'm glad I didn't have any idea, about how supernatural and shocking it is, because I actually screamed in the theatre. I was like, oh no, oh my God. Now, fortunately, everyone around me was also screaming. So please take that into account and don't think me an antisocial theatre goer. I was amongst good company. We were all freaking out. And then at the end of the first act, actually, I realised as we walked out, we hadn't clapped because we were all so busy shrieking. And then we all laughed at ourselves shrieking and we all just started immediately talking. And then I thought, oh my God, how rude, we didn't clap. But I think the actors will actually enjoy that response, because instead of it being a very polite, we're at the theatre response, it was like, oh, we're in an altered state and we feel like we're right there. And that is the greatest compliment to both the creative team and the actors on the stage. So today, this very feminist piece that has themes of feminism and what war trauma does to you and does to your feminism, and what autocracy does to women and feminism, and how it can make you paranoid and how it can make you see things that aren't there, or it can make you understand your world in a different way, and how it can make you disassociate and feel things are being said and done to you, or perhaps you're interpreting one thing to seem like another so that you can deal with it better. Motherhood, it has so many incredible themes in it. So I feel so lucky that I got to watch this show, and now I get to talk to some of the, one of the cast and some of the creative team. So hello. Thank you so much for joining me. Could you, for the listeners, just each introduce yourself and tell us your part in the play? So let's start with Nadia.
Hi, I'm Nadia Latif, and I'm the director of Under the Shadow.
And Carmen.
I'm Carmen Nasr, and I'm the playwright who adapted the script.
Great. And Leila?
I'm Leila Farzad, and I play Shida in the play.
So can you tell me a little bit about how this play came to be and how it came to be on at the Almeida?
So in 2022, the Almeida had already got the rights to produce the film or to sort of adapt the film. I'd written something else for them for their young company before that. And they were looking for a writer. And there was a sort of little list of writers they were putting together that I was very lucky to be on. And then as part of that, I hadn't actually seen the film. So I watched the film for the first time and immediately just felt really drawn to it. I've always been interested in being of Lebanese heritage and having grown up in Beirut. I've always been interested and sort of very preoccupied with themes of war and what that does. And so to see a story in a film that told a story about war and also about oppression and about women in a very inventive way through the genre of horror just felt like a really, really rich and exciting offer. So I was immediately really wanted it. But then I had to pitch my sort of vision to the filmmaker and to the Almeida team. And then, I got to sort of to work on it. And then there was a couple of years of writing and redrafting and working with the dramaturg, also sort of sharing the drafts with the filmmaker and getting some of, his notes. And then I can't remember exactly what year, Nadia, but then Nadia Latif, the brilliant Nadia Latif, came aboard as the director once the Almeida was sort of, happy with where the draft was. And that began a whole new process of work. So having a collaborator come in and another woman as well was really exciting. And I suddenly wasn't alone with it so much. I had someone else to share that vision with. And Nadia not only directed the show, but did a huge amount of dramaturgical work on the script with me. And then it was eventually programmed. So that was kind of my journey with it.
Wonderful. Nadia, how did this come to you?
I'd been talking to the Almeida for quite a long time about doing a show and not quite finding anything. We couldn't kind of settle on anything that like I wanted to do as much as they wanted to do. You always do that thing of I think unfortunately it's Quentin Tarantino who said your only responsibility is to your body of work, and I really believe that. Like I would really like people to look back at everything I did and be like, I understand the journey and the politics and the argument that this artist was making across their career. And I remember Rupert sent me Under the Shadow, and to be honest, I was not massively for film adaptations on stage. Like it wasn't anything I'd ever really considered, but I'd seen the film twice in the cinema. I really enjoyed the film. I'd actually taught it during the pandemic at a film school, and I think particularly, I'm from Sudan, and my country had a popular revolution in 2019, and obviously was in a civil war by 2023. And that had just happened before this play came across my desk. So I think a bit like Carmen, I too am very keen to talk to issues of war and families having to live through war, or maybe more pertinently, the question of whether to stay or go, because my family had to go, like 15 million other Sudanese people who fled the country. And so I felt like anything that I do, that this was actually a deeply personal story to get to tell at this time. It's not sort of something far away. And I wanted to make something very personal. I wanted to make something about women. I'd just come off making a film about a bunch of men. I was like, it'd be quite nice to spend some time with some women. The men are lovely, but and also I think, I've been known to make horror films of my own, and I was quite keen to kind of use some of the tricks that I'd learned and see if I could make them work in a kind of older theatrical tradition of smoke and mirrors rather than anything high tech. So it was, just it's the classic: right place, right time, right play.
Which you really did, by the way. It was really scary, and scarier than a horror film in a way, because you're in the room with the scary thing.
It's like a theatre audience is always more imaginatively engaged than a film audience. Like, you're having to construct the fourth wall constantly, even like, this is a real room. And you go, obviously it's not a real room. You're all facing outwards. But so actually I think a theatre audience is more, this is a poor choice of word, but it's more vulnerable. Do you know what I mean? Like they're much more kind of open and emotionally vulnerable to things like scares. So you have to do way less. Actually, I mean? It's like, it's actually about withholding for as long as possible, I think, and then delivering just enough. It's the it's like Jaws. You never show them the whole shark until the last seconds.
Absolutely.
So you only get the full gin right at the very end. Up until then, it's all it's a bit of hinting at it. But yeah.
And by gin, if you're not familiar with that and you're listening to this, we're not talking about gin and tonic as the normal theatre gin in the interval. We're talking about a kind of, how would you describe a gin?
If I were to explain it, I mean, it's a sort of spirit that exists within Middle Eastern culture. It sits like within Islam, but also alongside it. All of us will tell you that we grew up, like with various kind of stories of jinn. Whether our families kind of believe in them or not is something you know about. But it was best explained to me that if angels are good and devils are bad, then jinn is something in between, in that it has its own kind of desires and what it wants to do. But my grandmother explained that as they're the reason that good things happen to bad people, basically, which is really scary, right? It's the idea of like, you could just be minding your business and like get hit by a bus. Do you know what I mean? And like, you could be a good person, but it's not going to protect you from malevolent forces. But so yeah, there is supposed to be good gin, but I've never heard of one. Do you know what I mean? They always seem to be like the reason you like fail your exams or something. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, there was a bad gin hanging out around the house. So
yeah, the good gin at having a day off. Carmen, how is it making this piece of work at the moment when you're saying, being from Lebanon and living through war as a Lebanese person, how is it presenting this piece of work at the moment when Lebanon is being ravaged the way that it is?
I think there's something really moving about being able to create something with a group of people who are from all different parts of the Middle East and to come together at a time when we're all suffering in different ways and all our countries are going through different things. So to be with a group of people over the last 8 weeks or 10 weeks who there's a shorthand between us. We really everyone understands the situation on such a sort of personal and deep level that you don't have to do a lot of the explaining that often comes with being from a country that's being bombed, and that can be quite tiring. And also, you sometimes try and talk about it, but then the explaining doesn't allow you to express yourself properly. So really actually the making of the piece, coming together with a group, has been extremely comforting in many ways. And to be able to create something when there is a lot of destruction and when people are being silenced is a real privilege. So I think, such a positive experience. But I think it's funny. I had a playwriting tutor who said to me once, like, you don't know what the play is about until you sit down in the first preview. And I was like, oh, that's not true. They're just saying that. That's like a little thing they say to everyone. And then, every time I have made a play, it is so true. And with this one, there was something about sitting down and seeing it in front of an audience for the first time, where a lot of the things that had been in me really instinctually, I guess, and I poured into the adaptation and everyone else too, suddenly became really clear. So I think that especially sort of, obviously there's the horror element, but the kind of horrors of war, there's a scene in the play where there's a scene of loss and grief. It really struck me how important it was for me to include that and to make space for it. So in the film, because films are generally shorter, and this film specifically, there wasn't a huge amount of room for that. It's sort of a passing moment, I guess. Whereas with the play, I really wanted to make space for it because I feel in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Sudan, in Iran, there's been so much grief, and we've watched that unfold on our screens, and we've watched that unfold on our phones. And that's been a very visceral experience for many people, but also it's very distancing. And people's grief has been denied and been questioned. And there's been sort of all these conversations that have not allowed it the kind of dignity and space. So, there was something about watching that moment where I thought, oh, gosh, this is really what it's been about for me as well. I mean, it's about many things, but it felt very pertinent to suddenly see that in front of an audience. So it's an act of creations, and that's ultimately very hopeful. It's something that Nadia said on our first day of rehearsals, and it's really stayed with me. But there's also the opportunity to humanize the characters, to spend at least, the first hour sort of really getting to know them before anything terrible happens to them is also felt really important to me, because often you don't get to do that with news stories. The people who we watch suffering don't get a chance to be human often. And so that also felt really important, that arc, before we start to see death and before we start to see horror.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Leila, what drew you to this role and how did you approach her?
I mean, what didn't draw me to the role? It's a kind of absolute gift of a thing to be offered. The writing, working with Carmen, working with Nadia, working at the Almeida, portraying an Iranian woman like an Iranian woman I haven't really ever seen before, certainly not on the British stage, who is so angry and repressed and ambivalent towards motherhood and so stuck, but yet has to just keep going. It just spoke to me, so it was an absolute no-brainer.
Can you tell us a little bit, Leila, about the story? Because if people are coming in fresh, I've sort of described the themes, but can you do, without spoilers, can you do a little bit of the setup of where we are and who your character is and what her fears and goals are?
It's Tehran. It's 1988. We're in a relatively nice apartment somewhere, and Shida is living there with her husband and their daughter. And he is a doctor, and she was training to be a doctor, and her license or her ability to practice was revoked because she got involved with politics during the revolution. So she's in limbo, waiting to see if she can somehow restart that and go back to her studies and become someone in her mind rather than just be a housewife, which for her is her absolute nightmare. You see this very rational, relatively sort of, I guess she could be called cold, but she's just trying to cope, dealing with her day-to-day life and her daughter and her neighbours. And she's then, there is a malignant force, a jinn, in the building, which she is in the beginning completely in denial about and eye-rolling about, and finds the whole thing utterly ridiculous. And while at the same time still trying to convince the university to take her back, and at the same time trying to parent. And the malignant force gets bigger and bigger, and she can't then deny it any longer. And in the end, there's a sort of reckoning of her beliefs and who she loves and what she feels and how much pain she's actually in, which I don't think has ever quite dealt with.
And I think a lot of it is about when you might start your refugee journey because you really, really need to,
Yes.
which I think is such an important play at the moment, because people watching it will be shouting in their heads, go, just go. The whole time I was like, just go. People are offering, we're leaving now. Oh, no, I've just got to do this one more thing, or we've got to find this, or I've got to go there and say this to this person. And we're all just going, just get out. Whatever this, and I wasn't sure if the jinn in the house was supernatural or psychological, which I think was deliberate. Carmen, is that correct? And Nadia?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's sort of the original source material in the film. That's very, very sort of embedded in it. That this is something psychological, and I think in the play, Mrs. Ibrahimi, one of her neighbors, who's sort of more knowledgeable about the jinn than Shide, sort of says, they one of the things that can happen is that they can get into your mind and they can play tricks on you, and so it's really we really wanted to lean into that. And I think as well, Nadia, with the horror itself and making it, that felt like a sort of real driving force.
Yeah, my favourite note I've ever received was from a film exec on a feature film I made. And the note was, "Is this ghost real?" And I could get it tattooed on my forehead. I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. But I was like, wow, this is an existential problem. Is this ghost real? And I was like, well, I mean, it's real enough. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's as real. I was like, all these things are projections, man. Like, it doesn't have a body, that's for sure. So I think that in a way, anything becomes real if you believe in it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you can call it whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it's not the same as, like, I don't know, the kind of horror where you're like, there's definitely a shark in the water, or there's definitely a man who's trying to, like, stab me.
Get through the window,
things, fine. But I think all of these things, interestingly, I was sort of rewatching The Exorcist for the umpteenth time quite recently. And it really struck me how much that film is about a mother's guilt. And it's about a mother's guilt at her own success. Do you know what I mean? Like, she feels like she's being punished she's a very successful actress. She's being punished for getting divorced. She's being punished for going back to work and being on a film set and all those things. And for how long in the film, she doesn't want to believe that it's a possession. She wants to believe that it's her fault because it's easier to believe that it's somehow your fault. And that, and I was like, God, I mean, this film is, how many years old, and it's just like so incredibly insightful into the power of the guilt that women can put on themselves. And so I think that Shide's journey, a lot of the way through the play, is about whether it is easier to believe in rational things or succumb to irrational ideas. Do you know what I mean? Or things that are definitely not scientific. But the simplest explanation is often the best one. Like, I would blame the gin. I'd be like, yo. I do think, just to go back to your point about refugees, I think one of the most important things about this play and these characters is that obviously, it kind of goes lights up middle class home in Tehran, and in a slightly obnoxious sense, people like us. Oh, look, she's got a poster from a European art gallery on her wall, and she's doing aerobics videos. And I think that one of the biggest problems in the kind of refugee myth over the last 50 years, or particularly in the last 10 years, is about the nature of people who become refugees from their own home. And of course, as any of us know, actually the majority of people are people who can afford to flee their countries. Do you know what I mean? And so I think the whole thing of like a middle class woman having to negotiate with the idea of leaving her home, and what that means, I think it just speaks to a very specific thing about like the many types of people that are having to deal with that question. That it's not it's not like a thin slice of the pie. It's like a very thick slice of the pie. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And what really struck me is her husband is a doctor. She was at medical school, got thrown out because she was a radical left dissident. So now she can't complete her medical degree. Meanwhile, her husband's happily going off and being a doctor. And he's saying to her, well, maybe just give up on that dream, have a second child.
Have another baby, yeah.
Have another baby, which is what he wants. And he is obviously in a progressive couple. He was attracted to this left-wing progressive protesting woman, and they see eye to eye. But when push comes to shove, and she's saying, let's go, let's leave here, let's go to Europe. I could be a doctor there. We could be a family, it would be different. I'm raising a daughter here. I'm feeling oppressed. He says, I don't want to go to Europe. Well, we're going to turn up and be these kind of, refugees. It's going to be cold. It's going to be miserable.
Where no one even wants us. He gets to go to
where no one even wants us. He's like, I'm fine. I've got what I want. Yeah. I've got a career. I've got a beautiful wife. I've got a child. If my wife just wanted another child and wasn't ambitious, everything would be fine. Mm-hmm. And his attitude is, who wants to be a refugee if you're a doctor with a nice house? And good fucking question, actually. Like, nobody wants to do it. So something's got to propel you. But for her, she's so desperate to be a doctor.
Not to stick up for Shide's husband or anything, but I do think, I always find the line in the play that he has, where she says, people go all the time. And he says, yes, but they never come back. And I think that's, as somebody who has not been able to return home myself in 3 years, that is a very powerful thing. That it's not a two-way door. Sometimes it is. Maybe in like the happiest version of it, you would leave and you would come back when things are better, but things don't get better. And actually, sometimes you are never allowed to come back. And I think for that absolute severing to everything that is familiar to you, and he says it's a home, is really difficult. But you're right. I mean, he is obviously benefiting from the situation.
And he's high status in Iran. Like what you have to deal with when you are a refugee is your status will shift. And in Iran, he's a doctor. He comes from this relatively well-to-do family. He's got his mum who's still... So I think the status shift is what I've always noticed that Iranians have talked about, at least in my experience, of like, oh, you're treated differently and you're viewed differently. And I remember the kite runner observed it really beautifully. The guy, the main character in that, coming and being a gas station attendant, having been, I can't remember, but it's that kind of the difference in how you're perceived and what it does to your ego and your insides is really intense, I think.
Yes, I've got sort of become family friends with a family who had to leave Iraq. He had very high status and they had a kind of exciting job and a really, really beautiful house. And it was so difficult to go to a country where he wasn't allowed to work, because he was like, I don't want my sons not seeing me work. And then none of your qualifications are recognised. It's just like, start again, be a handyman, drive an Uber. And so it would take years and often people are very traumatized because of what they've been through. And then it would take years of studying, and where are you going to get the money for that? And do you speak English well enough to study in a second language, and all of that? It's the destruction of the soul, really. It's like, but I was this. It's the identity. I was this, and now people see me as this. We were talking about it the other day that with friends who have been refugees and are now British citizens, it's just a really tough day where you have to go, I think I might be a refugee, or it dawns on you slowly, because nobody identifies as a refugee on day one. They identify as, I've had to run. I'm me in a slightly different place. I'm me here now. How do I get to the next place or the next level? But at some point you have to say, oh, I'm a refugee. And one of my very close friends said, he was in the Calais jungle, and he said, I had a friend there who will never say it. He's just like, I'm displaced. I'm not a refugee. I'm not like these other people. And he was like, mate, this is who we all are now. Like, you have to accept it. But it's like this identity piece that I think people don't really realize that. They just see refugees as a sort of mass of people who want stuff, but actually...
And they know nothing about the kind of humiliation that you receive when you come to school. There's an amazing film by a Chadian director. The film is called A Season in France, and it's about Chadian asylum seekers in France. And like one of the characters in it, he like kind of gets a job working as like the security guy outside a perfume shop. And he's kind of the comic relief. So you're like, oh, this guy's nice. And, that you just know that he's going to try to get his papers like every week. And then eventually at the end of the film, you see him walk into the kind of, whatever the government building is that he's been going to the whole way through, douse himself in petrol and set himself on fire. And you just realize that this sort of like systemic humiliation and like having to go and beg for your right to feel safe has just gotten the better of him. You know what I mean? And it's like, I just think that it's, and this is 1988, obviously in the play, obviously it's definitely relevant to this moment, but it would be, there would be a sharpening if we were to talk about it right now. Do you know what I mean? And hopefully the audience sort of does that, right? That they go, I can think about, when he says, you want us to go, but what if we never come home? That they think, what would happen to them if they turned up today?
And it's interesting with the whole idea of the rational and the irrational being about the jinn eventually, but that argument starts right at the beginning, because both of them are making very rational arguments for why, and both arguments are logical. One is like, if we leave, we never come back, and this is a good life. And the other one is Shida saying, it's irrational for me to stay here when I can't practice. But the oppression she's facing also feels irrational, right? There feels like there's no rhyme or reason that she's being denied the opportunity or the chance to qualify. So she's battling irrational forces on all fronts somehow, and then they all kind of coalesce into the supernatural, because it's so much to bear. But I think also talking about going back to this theme of what you leave behind when you go. I've recently been reading a really brilliant book by Tariq Bakoni, who's a Palestinian academic, and he's just written a memoir called Fire in Every Direction. And sort of his conclusion at the end, he sort of understands his privilege of, he's Jordanian as well, of not having really escaped war per se. And it's like, what have I lost? And really it's this idea that by leaving somewhere where you're from and not being able to grow up there or continue your life there, you sort of become in exile from your authentic self. And that's a really kind of deep sort of philosophical way to look at it. But it's really hard to articulate. And I think there is something about being denied a part of you. I sometimes wonder if I'd stayed in Lebanon and gone to uni there instead of here, would I be a different person? Who would I be? And I know that that's something other people in the cast and the creative team have talked about. But there is this idea of being exiled from yourself somehow that feels slightly indulgent when you're talking about safety, right? But it does exist as a theme and as a topic.
Absolutely, because people have different personalities in different languages, because different languages lean into things, and the culture, the comedy, the banter, the ways of being. Of course, you become shaped by your community, by your peers, by your what you watch and listen to and take in and how you interact. So inevitably you become someone slightly different. Leila, how do you...
Isn't that... sorry, I just was reminded there's a poet, I think her name's Athena Farrokhzad, who wrote a brilliant poem. And I remember there's 2 lines in it where she's talking about all the members of her family. And she said, "And my father says, I want to die in a country where people can say my name." And I know it's kind of funny, but I've always thought about that, I promise you, like most of our parents or people like us, our parents feel a great urge to go home in their later years. There's a real pull to die where you're from, or to see out your golden years where you're from. And I don't know what that is. And sometimes it defies logic. You're like, but why? Everything is here for you in France or England or whatever. But the pull to be able to return home, the reason that Palestinians, when they were thrown out, took their keys with them because they believed that they would one day come home. And, it's incredibly moving. So I sort of think it's like instinctual and spiritual and biological in a way that defies logic and reason, actually.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Leila, there are really interesting feminist themes in this about your character kind of going back to the university. She's heard from somebody that a man has got back in who's in a very similar situation because he's gone to talk to the head of admissions. Have I got that right?
Exactly.
And you want to go and talk to the head of admissions because you think, and you actually delay leaving a very dangerous situation, both because of bombing and also supernatural forces. That's how important this is to you, even though you've got a child. It's so important because you think this is my shot. Yeah. And the first time you go, there's a woman who says, you're not dressed modestly enough. Mm-hmm. And you're clearly not the kind of applicant we would want. So she comes back dressed more modestly. And then the way that the head of admissions talks to her is so humiliating and so feels so desperate because it's so desperately sad because all she wants to do is be a doctor and help people and use her brain and be a good physician. And that's her calling in life. She doesn't want to do anything else. And she's being denied because of what she says is, well, it was a silly mistake, but actually it's still the politics that she still believes in, I think. But she's got to say that. She's got to humble herself and say, I don't believe that anymore. Can you speak a little bit about that? And especially in light of what's happening in Iran at the moment with women both being exceptionally oppressed and punished for lack of modesty, perceived modesty, but also their country being bombed and people dying. So much constant feeling and empathy at the moment for the women of Iran and the people of Iran. How is that? How are those scenes to play out?
I suppose, yes, since 1979, the obligatory headscarf is such a kind of a talking point, and it's so emblematic of like how the Iranians feel so like shrouded, and it is not you have no choice, you have to wear it. And in the 80s it was, when I was there in the 80s, and the religious police would literally be policing the smallest amount of hair coming out of your headscarf and shouting at you to put it up, and you had to wear it from age 9. And I suppose the dichotomy between the inside life of the Iranian and the outside life of the Iranian is so, so different. And you see Shida's, kind of cultured, elevated life. And then you see her trying to finish her studies and being told that the reason she can't finish them is because she dared to speak her mind. And she dared to kind of, say what she actually thought. So I suppose the women in Iran now, since Mahsa Amini and the Women Life Freedom movement, the footage I see and what I hear is that there is women defiantly removing their headscarves, walking around with their hair down. And my mum can't even watch it because she feels so frightened for them, because the bravery is like nothing we can really imagine, because you can just be shot in the back for having your hair out. So I think we are at a tipping point where the government, interestingly, they are just walking around and having dinner with their hair out at the moment, much more than when I was there, where it was, if you saw a woman without a headscarf, you would assume she had somehow lost her mind. Like it was that fright, like it was an absolute non-negotiable that you had to wear your headscarf and you had to tuck it in a certain way so that not even a single strand of hair was popping out. It's such a strange thing, what it symbolizes and what it is for the Iranian people, the hijab.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because like a hijab is one of the most like weaponized items in the feminist argument. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and when misused badly, it's like it is impossible to wear a hijab and to be feminist. The point is not about the hijab. The point is about a woman's right to choose. If you want the right to choose to wear a hijab, that is your choice, absolutely.
Of course.
But men have no business policing women's bodies, any part of our bodies, our reproductive organs, our heads, our feet, our arms, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that, you know, I have some very religious women in my family who wear a hijab, and they have very unreligious daughters who don't, because frankly, it's like none of their business. And actually, they don't pressure their children to wear it. They're like, that is my choice.
Up to you.
Live your life, go mind your business. And I think all of these things and the connective tissue between feminist movements around the world has to be about women have to have the right to choose to do whatever the hell they want to do with their bodies and their minds. And, you know what I mean? Like, and it's, you know, again, the thing that's terrifying about the Iranian regime is a bunch of men turning around and, you know, telling women what they should do.
No, I think you're right. And I think predating the regime, you had the Shah, and the Shah was, his shortcomings that he was so desperate for Tehran to resemble Paris that he sort of was telling women not to wear the headscarf, and these devout women who, you know, need it and wanted it, and it was part of their identity and everything, and it's so important to them, were being told, no, take it off, and we're gonna pave the streets of Iran like it's Paris, and we're gonna sit outside and smoke Gauloises and all wear miniskirts. And that's the stupidity of that is extraordinary when you're looking at the kind of the whole of your country, and then you have the complete, now you have you know, we've gone all the way the other side. So when you live in a country like England where you can choose to wear and dress however you like, it's something that I think people don't think about living here, but it's a wonderful liberty to have,
And I
that
think,
no one tells you how to dress.
yeah. And I mean, just even now that there's talking about it, like you were saying that Nadia, about that the hijab is sort of, yeah, it comes up a lot in feminist discussions and arguments. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of paradoxes when it comes to the Middle East and feminism and female empowerment, and it's so complex and there's so many things rubbing up against each other, and often that gets flattened out. But you know, I grew up in a country, Lebanon, which is quite famous for being quite liberal, for example, when it comes to women. But actually, when you live there, what you discover is there's a huge amount of diversity. So, you know, you can be in the beach one day and people are dancing on the bar in G-string bikinis, and then you literally pop down the road and people are veiled. And like Nadia said, I had many friends growing up who had veiled mothers, but they weren't veiled themselves. So there's a real mixture. And I think, you know, people might roll their eyes and say, well, in Lebanon, you had a civil war because of the tensions between Christians and Muslims and different moral values. But I moved there in 92 when I was 4, just after the Civil War. And so I was lucky enough to sort of live there for the 10 years with this sort of post-war generation who, you know, didn't quite remember the Civil War and went to mixed schools and had all these friends and really got to experience what it's like to have freedom of choice. And it's a great thing and it's possible. But it's, yeah, when you remove those freedoms and when you start to police people either side, that's when it all goes wrong. But I've had a vision of what it can be like. And it's wonderful when you can do whatever you want.
Yes, that ability to walk down the street without men telling you to put on more clothes or take some off. Although I think, you know, my friends who cover here do say, of course, now they get a lot of microaggressions on the street. And I've had friends who say that they get shouted at both ways, sort of by sometimes Muslim men saying, cover up, even though they're wearing a headscarf. And sometimes men saying, you know, take it off, or women saying they're oppressed. What I saw in the play was a very kind of nuanced, interesting take. It was like a kaleidoscope of how this one character moves through her day, her building. If she pops out, if she answers the door, what she has to do. Doesn't matter whether she wants to or not, that she's going to be judged by the way she does it, even though she does it. It was really, really interesting. What do you all want people to take away from the play? Or if you want to leave that open-ended, what have you been surprised to hear people have taken away from the play, or delighted to hear people have taken away from the play?
I think that you always want people to come out of any play, really, feeling like radical empathy. Or like, so I don't know, maybe just certainly the work I make, or just like a sense of like, I opened myself up emotionally to the experience of somebody else who is not like me or is like me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I sometimes wonder, like, I'm always interested to hear what Iranian people watching the play experience, because like I certainly feel since the war in Sudan started, there have been many excellent Sudanese films that have come out in that period. I have not watched a single one because I cannot bear to. It's too painful to me. I don't want to open myself up in that way. So I've sort of been very moved by Iranian people who normally it's their parent who has made them come. And they're like, my mum really wanted to go, so I had to come with her. And how much they enjoyed it or were upset by it, or, you know, felt like it was just like deeply, deeply Iranian, and how that was lovely to see on a stage, even though it's in English and obviously it's not performed, it's performed in English accents, that actually we're trying to kind of distill this moment of Iranian experience. And then obviously it's, you know, it's an entertaining story and there's thrills and there's scares and all those things. But I just sort of feel like you want to end it feeling like you are more emotionally alive than you were when it started.
Yes. Carmen?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I've got all these thoughts rushing through my head. What do I want people to take away? I think there's something about them, like you said, about emotional empathy, but also just being able to go away from this, understanding nuance and paradox, you know, and understanding that in Iran, people are living with so many different things that are happening. It's not just one type of oppression. There's also Western oppression. There's also your government. There's, you know, there's so many things going on. It is really complex. So that when they do approach stories from Iran or news stories or political issues, that they're able to really look at it, like you said, as a kaleidoscope, rather than with one sort of with an agenda already set out. But also, I hope to go away having experienced a variety of different characters from all different political spectrums, and hopefully with the understanding that, you know, we can all live together. Because I think that's really important. We often talk about living together in the West from people from different cultures, but in the Middle East, we also need to learn to live together with our differences, because that's the future.
Leila?
I suppose, so the last few days we have had some Iranians who have come up to me in the bar afterwards and just sort of hugged me, very tearful, which I found very moving. And they can't even quite say what it is that's made them cry. But I think it's it's just representation. And Iran has been so kind of bastardized in the press and has there's such a strange version of it in people's heads. So I think it's to challenge perceptions of what it is to be an Iranian woman of this age, living through all these challenges, and what it is to live under conflict and how you manage it. And for people to come out and see the universality of it and also the specificity of it, because it kind of manages to be both of those things, with a lot of scares. And I think the female characters in this play are so memorable and gorgeous and different and kind of funny and heartbreaking. So I suppose I want people, next time they hear the word Iran on the news, to maybe think back to this play and remember the specifics and that particularness that we've all created together.
I think that's a great thing to end on, because I think no matter who you are, whether you're Iranian or you have Iranian heritage or family or experience or any kind of Middle Eastern heritage, or whether you like stories and you see lots of different depictions of Iran on the news and in the media, you will really get something out of this that is culturally specific. But also there are such universal themes like the difficulties of motherhood and daughterhood. It doesn't matter who you are really going to understand that in this play, that I mean, I know there's a number of actresses playing the little girl because it's a little girl and children can't work 8 hours a week. But the little girl that I saw was absolutely magnificent in this role. And I was like, I don't know how she was doing it, because normally when children have a role in theatre, unless it's Matilda or something, it's quite a small role. And she had a really big role. And I was like, wow, this is quite impressive, what she's doing. But I thought that central relationship, which was troubled, and there was a lot of conflict in the relationship as well. And your character's constantly wrestling with her ability to be a good mother, and did she really want to be a mother? And there's just so many, did she want to have another child, and all of that. There's so much there that's universal as well as culturally specific, and also it's very, very entertaining as well. It really races by. It's not a short play, but it really races by because it is very gripping. I found it very gripping as well, and there are some jump scares, but you really do get very wrapped up and involved in the play. So if you can see it, see it. If you can't see it, maybe you could buy a copy of Carmen's text, and I will put all of that in the show notes. Before we go, is there anything you came to say that you didn't get to say?
I think sometimes people think the Almeida's always sold out, but there are tickets, so do check.
Okay.
There are tickets, so I think to encourage people to have a look. And to come along, it's great to see. So it's just always great to go and just to see the mixture of people that are coming. So I'd encourage people to come along.
Great, and it was a very diverse audience tonight. I was there, I will say.
Yeah, well, Iranians like to show up. It's an incredibly creative. I mean, they've got some of the greatest cultural output. Like in cinema alone, you just go like Iranians are absolutely top tier. And I would actually advise people, if they were like really interested by the play and they were like, hey man, this sounds cool, to actually like seek out. There's lots of cinemas programming Iranian film. Like there are kind of like acts of solidarity with Iranians happening in cultural buildings around the city and around the country, and just to keep an eye out, because it's an incredibly rich culture that have a huge amount to say, often at great personal political cost, and I think just continuing to support kind of Iranian creative output is really important.
Absolutely. Leila, anything you came to say you didn't get to say?
I don't think so. I just think
don't have to have anything.
I think we're proud of what we've created together, and I'm glad that it resonated with you. That speaks volumes to me.
It really did. It was extremely surprising and beautifully acted, and absolutely gorgeous set design, and really just an intriguing place to spend time. It's a play I've never spent time in that environment before. And I thought, this is why I love theatre. I always think of it as a new view from a familiar window, because I've certainly been at home doing an exercise video and then, had someone knock on the door and then this happened and that happened. But suddenly I'm somewhere totally different. I'm in the 80s, I'm in Tehran, I'm seeing things from different points of view. I'm feeling that feeling of, should we leave? No, don't be silly, we'll be fine. And, all of that's going on. I feel like it's so set in the 80s, but very relevant now. Under the Shadow is on at the Almeida Theatre till the 4th of July. If you would like tickets, go to almeida.co.uk. If you are in London or near London, can get to London. Do not miss it. Otherwise, seek out the text, which will be in print, or demand the Almeida tour the show to a theatre near you. Thank you so much. A big round of applause for Nadia, Leila and Carmen. All the details will be in the show notes, so check it out and go along. Keeps flashing, and it's only my square on the Zoom that keeps like an orange light, and I keep thinking, oh my god, the gin's in the laptop. This has never happened to me before.
Honestly, it probably is.
Don't say that. It's never happened. This has never happened before.
I've got evil eyes on my nails to protect me from this gin.
That will explain it. Yeah, it's just my screen. It's not just my square is suddenly ginning out.
Once you start to believe in it, you'll see it everywhere.
I'm just alone in this room with the door shut. I don't like it at all. But
not to stick up for Shido's husband.